Hello, this is Dr. Monica Y. Jackson, and I am the author of Wounds of Wisdom. Here's the book. You know the book. And if you've been following me, you know that I am the visionary and event planner for the T4 Summit, which is Trials, Triumphs, Truths, and Tears, as well as the M4 Summit, Men with a Message on a Mission Creating a Movement. And both of those events were held this year. The first one was in May. The T4 Summit was in May, and the M4 Summit was in September. They were both virtually. And if you follow me, you know that the source of both of those summits was a result of my book, Wounds of Wisdom. In the book, I talk about, I wrote it, 3 years ago? I talk about 7 wounds, 7 chapters, and it was written in 7 days. Okay. It was not intended to be a book. It just happened to become a book. And in this book, I have 7 chapters: friends wounds, workplace wounds, family wounds, church wounds, marriage and divorce wounds, business wounds, and children wounds. These are my realities. These are lived experiences. These are actual events. These are things that cannot be debated or negated because these are things that I personally experience. So why am I telling you all of this? I had 2 conversations on yesterday, and I wanted to highlight them because I find them disturbing. If you attended the M4 Summit, one of the things you'll know about me, I am very authentic. I'm truly transparent. I speak lived experiences, what is, not necessarily what's taught, was thought, or even believed, because those are things that I genuinely don't know. Emphasis on no. The only thing that I really know are the things that I experience. One of the things I said during the summit, the M4 Summit, was if you have not personally experienced it, it is an opinion or an accepted opinion that someone passed on to you. And I wholeheartedly believe that. So I encourage people, and my purpose and my message, my mission, and my movement is to unsilence the silenced, give voice to the voiceless, and empower and encourage individuals to release and get rid of their pain and live with peace and joy. Now, things that we talk about are not easy to talk about. However, people want you to suppress and keep quiet when things happen. When you speak against any institution or anything that's not the norm, quote, or acceptable, then people want to, they have issue with that. They either have issue with the topic or they have issue with you. But it's the truth. It's your truth. And just because they haven't experienced it or they have different beliefs doesn't mean it is should be negated. We talked about some very controversial topics during the M4 Summit: homosexuality, church hurt, finances, mental illness, things that plague us in our lives. And it was specifically for men, or men spoke about their pain, their hurts, their tears. And we talked about, man up. And our theme song was called Man Down. Too many men up leads to man down. So why am I talking about this? I received 2 calls on yesterday, and I gotta highlight those. One call was from an individual who actually attended the summit. And she called me. I want to back up before I get into that conversation. When my background is in higher education, I teach. I've taught critical thinking and problem solving at the university level for roughly 10 or 15 years. And so we talk about things that are reality, truths, things that actually happen, so that people realize that they're not alone in their experiences, in their thoughts, and so they can live and survive and not get caught up in the negativity, drugs, suicide, alcoholism, and all sorts of other addictions. So when I did a survey about the book. I have 7 courses that I offer: overcoming friends wounds, overcoming church wounds, overcoming family wounds, overcoming children wounds, overcoming marriage and divorce wounds, yada, yada, yada. So when I surveyed the public on 2 different occasions, the number 1 course that everybody wanted was overcoming church wounds. And the second one was overcoming family wounds. I found that very interesting because I personally, my wounds are in those 2 areas. Those are my most severe wounds. But guess what? We don't talk about them because they're taboo to talk about, or what happens in the home stays in the home. We just don't speak against certain things, but we're suffering in silence because we feel like we have to suppress it or there's something wrong with us. So back to the conversation. I received a phone call from someone who attended the summit, actually attended both summits. And she told me that she received a call from her mother, and her mother told her that her pastor told her to call her daughter, talk to her daughter, and tell her not to associate, or don't use my words, associate with me, because what I'm speaking is not of God. That's what her pastor told her mother. Her mother's pastor told her mother, and the mother translated the message to the daughter. Well, the pastor doesn't know me. I don't even know who this pastor is. I don't know the mother. But we pass so much judgment on people based on taking things out of context or what we hear. And we hear only a subset of the information. And sometimes we hear things that trigger us, get under our skin or ruffle our feathers, so to speak, and then shut down. We don't listen to anything else and hear the content. And too often in society, that's what we do. We pass judgment on people based on a comment and listen instead of listening and understanding. And a lot of times we don't want to listen or understand. And if it goes against the grain of your beliefs, things that were passed down, taught and told, not necessarily known, then you will take issue with it. I'm about knowledge. There are some things personally that just don't make sense to me. And since those things do not make sense to me, I'm not going to repeat them, mislead, or misguide people. I will say these are my opinions, my thoughts, my perspective, not what God told me, not a biblical verse or trying to pass it on as that. This is my lived experience. So we need to be careful with that. And so I go back to the number 1 course that everyone wanted, overcoming church wounds. Excuse me. When we had the summit, there were so many men who spoke about their own church wounds. So we wonder why people won't return to churches. Now, understand that some of us had to learn to separate church from God. Okay? Doesn't mean that we are against anything. Doesn't mean that we don't stand on a biblical principle. Doesn't necessarily that we associate with any denomination, because all of it's flawed. We don't want to accept that. It's no absolutes in that. So how do you bring somebody to you, to understanding your God, if you're already judging them? If your position is to convince somebody of how to be without you living it, it's a problem. So I wanted just to share that because I noticed that it occurs more often, just the defensiveness. And a lot of people don't want to listen to anything else or anyone else, because once you hear something else, it's going to make you think differently. Not necessary to discredit, but to ask questions. Because now it's like, does anybody really want us to think for ourselves? That's point number 1. I want you to learn to think for yourself, not what someone else tells you to think, not what someone else tells you to believe. Because what happens is you grow up, you get in your 50s, and you discover things differently. What do you do with all of that? Let's teach people not to follow. Let's teach them to discover and find out for themselves. When you know and can find out for yourself, you are less apt to be controlled and conform. So anytime I rock the boat or you rock the boat is because you don't just conform and just accept what everyone else does and just align with it. Now, for those who does, that works for you, that's fine. But some of us has experienced some things in life that no longer allows us to do those things, to just go along, to conform, to not question, to be loyal to a fault, because that's wounding. The second call that I had on yesterday was a lady took about a year to read the book. And she called and said she couldn't give me a review. Well, I didn't ask her to give me a review. She said, because I didn't experience a lot of things that you mentioned that you experienced in the church. And, it made her uncomfortable. I understand that. But for those of us who have experienced some uncomfortableness in the church, we're not turning a blind eye. We're coming together to speak up and to support one another so that we can continue to do what we're called to do and reach those who are reachable, because everybody is not reachable. Everybody doesn't have ears to hear. Everybody doesn't want to hear. And my message, just like your message, isn't for everybody. We want people to be the same, look the same, act the same, believe the same. But I think the word did say we all are uniquely and wonderfully made. There are just some things that are just going to be. Some things are not going to change. Why? The Bible even tells us we're going to have the poor with us always. So there's some things that are just going to be. There is no one that knows all and bees all. But again, when it makes you uncomfortable, ask yourself, why is what someone's speaking making you uncomfortable? Why? What is resonating with you? Is it making you think differently, or you don't want to question it? It is easier to follow and stay in the same beliefs and stay where you are. It is very uncomfortable to move out of what you have been taught and what you thought, because it disrupts your world. But sometimes disruption is necessary. That's where truth shows up, and there is peace. You are accountable for you, your thoughts, your actions, not someone else's. You can't blame anyone else for your actions and your thoughts. So we need to learn to be accountable individually. And once we know better, we learn better, we do better. So to that pastor, I hope that you examine your comment as well as anybody else who has comments that differ or don't align, because we can never unify with such division. And there's a lot of division that is unnecessary. So that's all I had to say for today. But I just want those who are struggling in many areas to know yourself, love yourself first, not last, but first. Give yourself permission to love yourself, and then love yourself like never before. Don't expect it from someone else. Give it to yourself. Once you give yourself that love, if someone doesn't return that love or give you and love you the way that you desire to be loved, maybe you need to change your atmosphere. That's just my tips for today. And I just wanted to come on and say that. Have an amazing day. Go over to drmonicajackson.com to stay connected, to purchase the book if you're interested, or just to reach out. So those who've read the book, those who've contacted me, those who embrace, thank you. Thank you for sharing your truths with me. Thank you for being authentically you. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.